easy to, reconcile, speak to a few friends and colleagues. What common mistakes do they do and all of that. And I'm quite excited to share as well so that we can all learn from it. It's also important to say that these mistakes are things that have happened to people in real life. So if you feel like your own is not there, yeah, we just picked a few out of it all. And our agenda today is basically looking at common mistakes, use cases of these common mistakes in software testing. What are their effects on dictating the organization and then mitigation of these mistakes as well. So I decided to add a personal quote from myself. I don't know how I'm going to make this a public quote, but I'll work on that, which is basically, even I recall when I was starting and a few others, and even a few years back now, one of the sales points for us as software testers is that, you don't need to know how to code to start. However, things are changing. So software testing is no longer a field reserved for people who doesn't love or like to code, or you don't like to do things that are technical. In fact, software testing now gives you at that level that when you are, people tend to worry, is it that Toby is a DevOps engineer? Is it that Jennifer is a back-end engineer? Because you are able to speak on some technical levels and some technical implementations that it looks like, this person must have probably been one of the engineers that worked on it. And trust me, software testing is towards that edge as of this time. So there are many common mistakes that are done or that happens today within the software testing domain. And depending on whichever one it is, it has its effects on your application and on your organization as the case may be. However, this is just the 7 that I think is common, but I've seen that is common across board. The first one here is lack of domain knowledge. I'm seeing an application as black box only, not getting in love with the application. Application architecture is not for testers or not understanding the application architecture, neglecting test maintenance, surface or UI level design oversight, and we also have improper testing. So in this session, we are going to be looking at all of these. I'll share 1 or 2 use cases with us, and we are going to look at it, right? The first one on my list is lack of domain knowledge. Please, I know I'm a bit fast. Jennifer, please let me know if at any point there's spring in my mouth and I'm going too fast. Did you get that, Jennifer? Okay, yeah. Thank you. So the first thing on my slide is lack of domain knowledge. Today in the technology industry, for every domain you find yourself, you are going to realize that there are a few compliance-related things that has to be met, regardless of the domain. Take, for example, the property management domain. For you to say you are going into a property management domain today, you need to have some form of registration, I think, some form of licensing. You need to have this and all of that. Take, for example, health. I think IPA also is there for health. When it comes to banking, there are some CBN regulation, there are some other things that you have to have. And all of this speaks together into the things that we need. Apart from regulations, when it comes to domain knowledge, it does not only speak to the regulation you think of or or that are probably government reliant only. There are also things that you need to understand. Say, for example, a mobile today has an e-commerce site, and this e-commerce site utilizes a delivery management service application. I need to know that, for every test I do to place an order, I need to confirm that my delivery partner actually receives this order. Basically gives you that domain knowledge. And the beautiful thing about having the appropriate domain knowledge for your domain or having this knowledge is that it helps you without even having handled the application. You are able to understand all of these aspects, all of these angles that you want to talk to or that you need to make engagements with while testing the application. So a scenario here on the slide is a tester validating a fintech app. This is quite common where you see a tester say, I'm testing and I use the BVN and this and all of that. Today, one of the BVN regulation is that when you are testing, when you are for every bank, all customers, regardless of their level or tier, needs to have a BVN. If they don't have a BVN, don't issue an account to them. All of these are part of regulations that you need to start putting at the back of your mind while testing. So you know that when I am testing any banking application that I am testing, I need to confirm that we are doing appropriate KYC validation on this application. Our we have the right partner, we are doing it, we validated, and we are sure that, our validating partner actually gets the request and sending those the appropriate details for the customer that we are trying to validate. So the result of missing out on this domain knowledge, in some cases, I'm using the fintech case here because it's quite common. You see that sometimes you fail audits. Sometimes you have to now do a costly rework where you've probably gone live and you have to pull the application back and now have to redo it. And one of the worst things that could happen is getting fines. And today, civilian fines are not smiling. You get huge fines for missing on things like this. So, for example, another thing here is seeing an application as black box only. And this is really interesting because this is something that has happened to me as a person. And why I'm really saying this is because I'm thinking of the perfect way to put it. It makes it look like you don't. It makes it look like missing out on this. Sometimes when it happens, makes it look like what have we been testing when it actually happens. So while black box is, one of the most majorly accepted process, or in fact, when you're doing manual testing in most cases, you do it as a black box test. However, it is important for us to know that whatever test you are doing has to be some form of hybrid to it. Yes, I don't write C#, I don't write Java, I don't write Python. I'm probably writing JavaScript that I use in automating. However, it's important for us to undo things, which is one of the things like, for example, a banking app's loan interest calculation logic. Today, from my few experience, when it deals with loan interest calculation, one of the approaches that people take is in mathematics today, we have round up and round down, where if it is more than 5, you round up, and when it is lower than 5, you round down to 0. That does not apply. You bring the value as it is. You don't say a 3.8 becomes a 3.8. Apologies. Can you still see my screen?
Yes, Mubarak.
Okay. Apologies, please. So you don't round down or round up in situations like this. You have to understand, and in most cases, finance people want you to leave it the way it is. So if you are getting a 3.8, a 32.38, a 32.38 does not become 32.40 as the case may be. Or you are getting 32.95 and you want to turn it to 32.40. No, it becomes a thing around, oh, this is how you keep the value as it is. So having to understand all of this. And the thing around, where it gets interesting and where this speaks to in its actual sense is that a lot of these calculations are not visible to the customer. It's not like, oh, I took a loan from this and we did our interest accrual and I can view my loan. No, that's not how it works. How it works is this loan accrual has a job that is probably being executed at some time in the day, and it probably keeps this information on the table. What happens at that point? You have to go, oh, I've run this job for today. I want to go and check if he has probably done the calculation. If there is any need for you to make some entries, did he do the right entry, and all of that as well. So another thing here that I have on my list is not getting in love with the application. So one of the things is that I have seen over time is that testers and product managers, product owners, and all of that. I think it's always right for us to see the application as the love of our life, And why I'm saying this is because it helps you see things. I don't want a partner that even I myself does not like or does not love. So I want someone that I'm willing to spend a lot of time with, And as such, it means that when you're testing an application, you need to understand how the application works. You need to know what causes this, that causes this, I need this here. One of the things that I love to do when I get onboarded on a project is to understand the project effectively, such that if I need to do something, and even if I need to achieve something, or I need to manipulate some level of data, I know what to do without having to be handheld on the application. This is usually very one of the things that everybody wants to. You want to quickly do the work, you want to quickly test and just go on like that. However, I think it's bad, and the fact that we are not in love with that application you're testing is one of the common mistakes that we make as testers. Application architecture not for testers or not understanding the application. So the application architecture, this is something that is quite common a bit. Testers want to avoid some of our technical documents. In fact, in some cases, organizations don't want to share. One of the things that I like about myself, or that one of the things that I started doing now is to, even when these documentations are not shared, ask for them or ask questions that require this documentation to come up. Say, for example, you're working on a delivery app, right? And you are relying on a third-party GPS API. You don't know, what's API, which API are we relying on to achieve this? If one of them is down, how many do we have in place? Ask these questions that prompt these artifacts being shared with you. And one of the things here that people tend not to speak about is things around verifications. You want to look at databases. You need to understand what is the architecture of my application. The data that I am inputting and expecting an output, how does my application handle it? I used to work with a tester, not in Nigeria, and I think he's a Pakistan person, and I learned quite a few things from him. This guy understood the application architecture to the point where he understands that, if you need take, for example, I need an admin user and this user does not have something. He knows what to do on the DB level to enable the user have that information. He knows a lot around the application architecture that I can tell you that this particular endpoint is speaking to this database, and he has all of this information. And what this helps you do is, in cases where there are input issues, you are able to identify that I think the problem is this endpoint. I've seen testers when an issue occurs and they tell you, no, it shouldn't happen. That issue you're saying happens only if this happens. And I feel like, how does it happen? How do you get to, it basically speaks to understanding your application and understanding your application architecture. Test maintenance. Neglecting test maintenance. This is something a lot of us battle with. This is not a one-time thing, in all honesty. It's something that we keep battling with. In fact, I currently have an issue around balancing it right now, because there are cases where you work on an application and it has a large chunk of test cases. Take, for example, your manual test. I currently have an automated test that has on my API, my pre-request scripts alone has about, I think, almost 70 lines, a lot of lines, and talk less of the manual test cases that is about 2,000 scenarios right now. So what now happens in this case? In situations where things are not properly, there's a lot of things you are doing, you are going to miss out on updating all of these things. And what that means is you are going to have stall tests. That's when you now realize that, this person left the organization, and we realize that we are not able to properly test this thing because there's probably no documentation from the previous testers and all of that. So these are also part of the mistakes that we make in most cases and in most situations. So it's always good to adopt the method where you make your changes and maintain your test as the case go. Surface or UI level design oversight. I've realized that some of us testers, in fact, me, for example, I'm not a very good colorful person. UI aesthetics are not really my thing. And one of the things that I have adopted is to sit down with people who are good at this thing. Okay, you know what? If I want to validate that this color that I'm seeing is of what I have on my design, how do I do it? How do I validate this? Ask these questions, learn it from people that actually know it. Because one of the effects, I've seen an application where you have the backend works fine and it's trying to return an error, and probably because the error is not being displayed to the customer doesn't know that anything is happening and all of that. So it happens, which is why you have the scenario where someone working on a bank application omits toast colors. You have a white background and your toast color also has a white background. However, the design is probably saying a green or a red, and you didn't pay too much of attention to it because you are focusing on, the UI, working on API integrations, application logics, and all of that. This probably eventually means you are going to have poor handling. Customers start complaining about things that you feel like these things should not be happening and all of that. Then we have the improper test planning. So one of the things that has really happened, and that happen to people a lot of time. This is also continual. In fact, it happens to experts as well. One of them is planning your test. And when I say planning your test, you see, I adopted an approach now to make life easy for me. I want to test this application. What are those forms of tests that I want to do on it before this application gets to my customer? And in order for me to do that, I first write them down. What are my scope of tests? You see, UI is my test only API level. Identify all of these things at the same time. Because in most cases, you want to rush, you want to prepare this documentation and all of that. A lot of us try to do this, and eventually you see that your test plan does not cover things around, oh, we need to do some level of performance, we need to do some level of automated test, we need to do some level of this. Thereby, at the point where you realize it, you feel like, oh, well, it doesn't look good if we go on with this. Let's do this. And as such, affects the timeline. It extends the timeline a lot in some cases, and in some cases, probably a little. So it's always good to have identified all of these things. Do some level of risk assessment to look at what are those things that could even happen or go wrong if I try to meet something important for us to do. And the next thing we'll be looking at is the effect of, testers' common mistake. First one is we miss critical defects. Because by virtue of probably, when probably missing a test step or something, you miss a critical defect, probably a performance defect. A very good example here is the e-Naira application that probably went live sometimes back. Look at that application. As effective and as good as it would have been, at some point he had to, be pulled down at some point because of bad user experiences and all of that as well. Security and performance bottlenecks, compliance failures, in some cases data corruption or loss as well. Integration breakdown. I'm not calling a third party that I'm relying on effectively. And I probably send intermittent messages, or you are sending inappropriate requests and all of that. All of this would actually happen as well. Brand reputation damage as well. This is one of the cost to organizations that could happen due to mistakes, around shipping out an application. Increased development cost, as well as unstable releases, where for every time you deploy, you are always having an issue here and there and all of that as well. Then how do we mitigate these mistakes? Basically, draft a test plan and take review before solidifying the plan. I took one approach while doing some of these things is whenever I'm preparing for a test, I share with colleagues that don't even work in the same organization. We are trying to build this thing. Do you think what I've done here makes sense? Do you think there's anything I've missed out? Reach out to senior colleagues, get their ideas and all of that. Acquire proper domain knowledge and skills. This is really important for us as testers. Ensure for every domain you find yourself, if you don't have the domain knowledge, try to acquire it. For example, today, I don't have the knowledge of cryptocurrency. I don't have the appropriate skill to say I want to work in a Web3 organization as of now. However, these are things that I'm already making plans to, acquire those domain knowledge. So when the opportunity comes, it doesn't look like, oh, it doesn't have this at this point. Ensure proper documentation and maintenance of artifacts. Keep updated with application updates and changes. Oh, we now have multiple partners. We have multiple this here and there. Whatever happens, keep yourself updated, and also love the application as your partner as well. And then lastly, testers should be the best of one, because you don't just love or perfect your partner. And the same thing needs to happen about your application. You don't just test because you want to test or because it's a job you have been paid to do. Test because you see that application as a partner, you want to perfect it. And I think at this point, I would appreciate if we can ask our questions and all of that. Thank you, guys.